What a finale to the tournament. Sergei Karjakin and Fabiano Caruana equal at the top of the tournament with just one round to play. Only those two could win the tournament, both from the younger generation. Karjakin, 26 years old, Caruana, 23 years old. Russian against American, and they played each other in the last round. Fantastic. And the winner would play Magnus Carlsen in November for the world title. So let's see what happened. Karjakin with the white pieces. Of course, a draw would probably be enough for Karjakin, assuming that Anand didn't win. But okay, Anand's motivation had kind of gone. So basically, Caruana had to really play for the win. So Karjakin played e4, and I think if you only need a draw, I think e4 is probably a good decision, because in many cases against many openings you get a lot of forced lines, forced simplifications if white wants. So I think Karjakin made a good decision there. And Caruana didn't go for a Spanish, he played a Sicilian, and it's a classical Sicilian, and again this keeps a lot of tension in the position, so I think a pretty good choice by him. But Karjakin not backing down, playing the Richter-Rauser variation with bishop g5, and this is all very main line. But I've always thought that this Richter-Rauser variation with bishop g5 is also kind of in some ways very solid for white to play. f4. So things pretty normal by now, and b5 is the normal continuation for black here. And I found a game that Karjakin played, a blitz game that went like this. Just bear that in mind. You'll notice some similarities with the game, and so on. But I won't go into any more detail. But instead of b5, Karjakin, excuse me, I'm going to make that mistake a lot. Caruana played h6. Of course, you preserve your bishop. And then b5, so slightly different. And Karjakin now captured on f6. Now, it's not possible to play queen f6 because of e5. And after this is taken, white sacks on b5, and there's a threat here. So g takes f6, played instantly by Caruana. Now f5. Okay, this is absolutely typical, and bear in mind that game of Karjakin's we've just looked at. Queen b6. So I think Caruana can be pretty satisfied with the opening, because it is very double-edged. There's imbalance in the position, and generally black very much would like to go into an endgame, because he has the two bishops, nice pawn centre. That king can often sit in the middle while black plays around on the two wings. So naturally Karjakin didn't want to go in for that, so he took on e6 and then exchanged on c6. An interesting situation that, in fact, Karjakin, although he only needs a draw, but actually he needs to keep the tension in the position and not generally not allow an endgame. Queen c6. So I think this is a good move. Good to keep the bishop on d7 so that it protects the sensitive e6 pawn. Now the reason that Karjakin has played f5 and taken here is that you can see it slightly exposes black's king. And this is the huge problem for black in this variation. The king has no really safe home. Not on the queen side, where these pawns have advanced. Not on the king side, where it's a bit airy. So basically black's king usually stays in the middle of the board, behind these three pawns. But of course that can be risky. Let's see how things develop. Bishop d3. Good solid move, and sometimes that bishop can even look over here. h5, that's normal. Threatening this, so the king pops out of the way. And now here is a typical idea for white. Supposing black plays queen c5 here. Now, e5 could be a very nice square, but white has this pawn sacrifice. This is absolutely typical, and we're going to see this throughout the game. And in fact, this is already incredibly strong. If d pawn takes, then bishop g6 check and queen d7 mate. If, let's see, queen e5, then this just opens everything up for white's pieces, and suddenly that queen has a good chance to go in the other direction, and this is very, very unpleasant for black. Or f takes, then yeah, this knight comes in, and this is absolutely fatal. So bear this one in mind. So correctly, Caruana played b4, pushing the knight out of the way, and only then queen c5. And that queen very usefully placed on these dart squares. Remember, black has the two bishops, white doesn't have a dart squared bishop, so that queen is sitting pretty there. And in fact, here it's possible to play e5. This has actually been played in a game before. Now, neither player really was in their preparation here. They're feeling the position. But e5 is a strong move. For example, queen e5, rook e1, and white just gets an enormous initiative here. This has actually been played before. And yeah, this is incredibly dangerous. This was a game between Pranstetter and Kozhol. Tbilisi 88. Pranstetter, a very dangerous Czech player, and he won a very nice game. And probably the best for black is to take with the f-pawn, but this allows the queen to come in, and this is already pretty dangerous. Now black can survive this, but white has a pretty good initiative. So Karjakin missed a chance there, but still he played a solid move, a normal move in rook f1, and bishop h6 attacking the queen, and the queen dropped back. And now a5, of course, important to support that pawn, and sometimes black can push forward with a4. White doesn't really want to take this pawn. This is typical for this variation. This would open up the long diagonal, and black has tremendous compensation. That bishop is now an absolute monster on g7. So b3 played. Now, this looks very odd, because it seems to give black the chance to attack. But in fact, it's actually very difficult to break through once that bishop sits on c4. It's a curious position. And it's a pretty standard device, I should say, that white uses there. Rook g8 and g3 and king e7. So Caruana finally decides, okay, my king is staying put in the middle of the board. If he reaches an endgame, then black is doing very well in this position. Two bishops, nice central pawns, possibility to break up these pawns here. That's an isolated pawn. Two bishops could be good. But Karjakin keeps the tension. Bishop c4 that looks at this sensitive point here and also opens up the d file. Now bishop e3, a very ambitious move from Caruana. It's not clear that that's the best move. Maybe bishop c6, something like that. No, maybe not bishop c6 in that position. Perhaps rook up instead, or a4 in fact. a4 instead of bishop e3 probably in this position. Might have been a better try, but bishop e3 is very ambitious. Probably knight f4 straight away is a good move for white. Caruana said he wanted to, this is the idea of bishop e3, to put the bishop here, but this is very risky. White has two decent continuations. You can either take on h5, of course that can't be taken because the bishop is on, or you can play knight d3 and the queen gets pushed around badly. So maybe Karjakin missed a good move there. Rook f3 is still a good move anyway. And now rook g4. So this is so tense. Queen f1 by Karjakin. Now this is serious. So the rook has to defend. And somehow, okay, Karjakin might have missed a good move in knight f4 earlier, but still he's managed to coordinate his forces pretty well. Bishop takes knight. I mean, really, you know, this bishop is looking stranded. I think this knight has to go. And now I was really surprised that Karjakin didn't take with the pawn, because now the e5 square is covered. And, for example, after rook g8, maybe he was worried about this, that black has some control over this file. Actually, e5 is a pretty good move, and this starts to, you know, if black captures, then this will open up these files, and that looks very risky. Black can play like this, and probably the position is roughly level, but it seemed to me that if Karjakin just needs a draw, then this would not be a bad way to play. I mean, white could easily be better in many positions there. So I thought g takes f4 was a reasonable way to play, but Karjakin played rook takes, and then I thought that, you know, positionally, black could be doing pretty well here. Again, you know, if he can station the queen on e5, for example. But a4, somehow this turns out very well for white, because after a4, in fact, although this looks very dangerous, in fact it weakens this pawn. Of course, if that pawn can come to a3, then black has achieved a great deal. But after this, very coolly played by Karjakin, in fact, it turns out that this has only helped white, because in fact white's king is still very safe. Bishop came back, and now bishop b3. The king is completely safe. It even has an escape square. The bishop is looking very nicely placed on b3. And suddenly the position is looking extremely double-edged. I repeat, I think in an endgame, I think black could well be better here, because of this isolated pawn, and the king protects the pawns very well. But in the middle game, that king is looking drafty. There's no protection along the second rank, and white's king is looking better protected. And with time pressure approaching, I think Karjakin played a really excellent practical move. He made this typical pawn sacrifice. Now, this is not by any stretch a winning move. Maybe objectively, black could well be better after this, but I think in practical terms, this is very, very difficult for black to play. Well, you can't contemplate taking with pawns. Then there's a check, and it's a disaster. Or d takes, and suddenly black's position is falling apart. So rook takes. I mean, this looks reasonable anyway to keep everything together. And, well, the immediate queen check, rook f7, keeps everything covered. But with that pawn gone, this rook can now swing across the fourth rank, and this is very dangerous, of course. If the queen retreats, then queen takes pawn. So rook d5, hitting the queen. Queen came back. Now, queen b6, so this gives black some breathing space. Rook h4, the rook swings across again. This threatened. Now maybe if black wants to kind of calm things down, then he should exchange, play the queen in, and just give up that pawn and put the bishop here. Now I think chances are about equal here, but that would kind of calm things down. But Caruana wanted to keep his extra pawn, and he's playing on. Queen d3, the queen returns to this excellent square, looking at the d6 pawn, looking at h7 as well. Of course, if the queen comes back, then that is merely repeating the position, so that's not what Caruana wants. So he played, very interesting, to cover that pawn on d6, he played bishop g2. So now the queen defends the pawn. Seems as though black is holding things together, but rook d4, what an excellent move. Hitting the pawn, forcing that pawn forward, but now the rook is restricted, can't defend over here, and that bishop can't defend obviously behind that pawn. Queen d2, excellent move, hitting that pawn. Now that's what I meant when I said that advance a4 actually loosened black's position because that b pawn is under fire. Probably Caruana should just bring the bishop back and give up that pawn. But this is a tricky situation. You can see the king is in danger because suddenly the white queen threatens to attack it from this side of the board, and sometimes it can go to that side of the board as well. Practically speaking, very difficult for black. That's why Caruana wanted to exchange rooks, but that has a fatal flaw. Rook d5 is a knockout blow. A fantastic rook sacrifice, threatening queen d7 mate. Caruana had simply underestimated this move. He played queen c7 to defend against the mate, and a precise move from Karjakin, covering e6, so preventing the rook coming back, and threatening the fatal queen h7, winning the queen. And there's no real defence here. Let me see, queen c6 would step out of the way, but the check is murderous anyway. In this position, well, bishop d5 is a winning move. Caruana played rook f7, but that got taken. Obviously, king f7, that wins the queen. Again, queen e5, last move of the time control. Caruana down to his final seconds, but rook d7 check forces checkmate. After this, Caruana resigned because if king takes bishop, queen h7 check, king e6, and queen d7 mate. I mean, a brilliant game from Karjakin, I have to say. I thought that he kept the tension incredibly well. He understood that he should keep the tension in the position, curiously, paradoxically, when he only needed a draw, but it was definitely the best policy in this game. And yeah, well, I think, Karjakin showed throughout this tournament that he has absolutely ice cold nerves, not only in attacking, in kind of prosecuting an advantage, but also in defending. Also showed great technical skill, and both those qualities he's going to need when he faces Magnus Carlsen in November in New York. Thanks for watching.